Did you know that there's a long list of Irish inventions and Irish inventors? Inventors that have changed the world. If it wasn't for Irish inventors, we wouldn't have things like our beloved Guinness. Or the ejector seat. I mean, I've never used one, but James Bond seems to love them. Or we wouldn't have Sudocrem. I mean, there probably isn't an Irish person amongst us that hasn't slapped a bit of Sudocrem on their sore thighs at one stage or another. But there's one invention and one inventor that, in my opinion, stands out among the rest. And that man is J.P. Holland, a fellow Clare man, an inventor of the modern-day submarine. And some people say that JP invented the submarine for one reason and one reason only. And that was to fight the British Navy. What's the crack? Welcome to season 2 of the Irish Guy Vlogs. My name is David Kelly and I'm kicking this season off with a historical look at Irish inventor John Philip Holland. J.P. Holland was born here in Liscannor in 1841 and this is his childhood home. He grew up here with his parents and 3 brothers. John was born 6 years before the famine, and even though we know he grew up in tough times, regardless of that, John received a very good education. And he loved engineering and he loved the sea, and it was these 2 loves that he continued out throughout his life, and they would allow him eventually to build a submarine. After his father passed away, John and his family moved to Limerick. He spent a lot of time in the Christian Brothers, and after completing his studies, he began working as a school teacher, working all over the country. While in Cork, JP had an excellent science teacher, Brother Dominic Burke, who encouraged JP to pursue his engineering. But unfortunately, JP became sick and left the Christian Brothers soon after. In 1873, JP emigrated to America to his brother, but shortly after he arrived, he slipped and fell on a frosty New Jersey street and broke his leg. He really has no luck. And it was during this time while recovering in hospital that John was finally able to work on the submarine, because in John's eyes, he believed that the submarines were the way that wars of the future would be fought. In 1875, John submitted his submarine plans to the US Navy, but they turned him down, calling his designs unworkable and a fantastic scheme of a civilian landsman. John was absolutely devastated. He had worked so hard but had gotten nowhere. But waiting in the wings were the Irish Fenian movement, a group of patriotic Irish people who were very interested in JP's invention. And you might be wondering, what would a group of Irish Fenians want with an underwater, undetectable boat that shoots missiles? Well, there's only one reason, and that was to fight the British Navy. Some people believe that the Fenians convinced Holland to build a submarine. Other people believe that Holland convinced the Fenians to build a submarine. It doesn't really matter. A large part of JP just wanted to get the submarine made, regardless of the cost. It wasn't like he put the missiles on it for fishing. He knew that this would be used for war. Another thing as well that people tend to forget is that this had never been done before. So JP not alone had to build a submarine by himself, but he had to convince these people that it could be done, that it was actually possible. One of the coolest things about being here in Liscannor, knowing that the submarine was invented here, to think that J.P. Holland came down here as a child and looked out at the ocean and didn't think of swimming or fishing. He thought of being under it. He thought about exploring the depths of the sea. And he was inspired by 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and other things like that. But for a kid to imagine a submarine and to want to invent it from a very, very young age, it's just crazy to me. Armed with $4,000 from the Fenian skirmishing fund, JP was able to quit his teaching job and work full-time on his submarine dream. In 1877, he built a small prototype submarine called the Holland 1. It was just 14 feet long and was powered by a 4-horsepower engine and could only hold a crew of 1. But sadly, it sank on its maiden voyage in the Passaic River in Paterson, New Jersey. So I'm here in the JP Holland Centre. It's in Liscannor, and this is dedicated entirely to JP. It's a small museum, but I mean, it's got some really, really cool things here, and it's just really nice that he's commemorated in his own town, you know. And they've even got some songs. So JP was a really good musician, and these are some of the songs that he actually wrote throughout his life. So he was a very talented man. Not only was he really good at engineering, but he's a very talented musician. But it only makes sense that he was a really good musician because, I mean, he was from Clare. But if you're passing through Liscannor, definitely pop into the JP Holland Museum. We've got a lovely restaurant called the Frantic Chef. The people here have been really nice. They let me in for the day to film around. And it's just a really nice place to have a stopover, you know, if you're passing through North Clare. I was told by the manager it's going to be open properly in March this year. They're going to remodel the whole thing, put projectors in, and it's going to look a lot different. So if you aren't going to visit, March is the time. I'm here now at the Cliffs Moher Visitor Centre, and they have a small-scale version of the Holland 1, so I'm just going to take a quick look at it. That was really cool to see. I mean, I know I have footage of the real thing, but I just wanted to come up here and get a look at the small version of it because I could get really close to it. But anyways, back to the video. In 1881, John launched the Holland 2, which became known from a newspaper report as the Fenian Ram. Compared to the Holland 1, the Holland 2 was an absolute beast. It was 31 foot long, it had a 15 horsepower engine, and it had an air compressed cannon inside. And the Holland 2 was the beginning of a new era in naval warfare. Regardless of its success, shortly after this, the Fenians severed ties with Holland. You see, the British had become worried about Holland's submarine, so they sent a French spy by the name of Henri Le Caron to drive a wedge between the Fenians and Holland. Using political influence and persuasion, he made the Fenians stop funding Holland. But this didn't stop JP. He struggled on. He developed the Holland 3, but it was sadly stolen, sank, and never recovered. Sadly, after that, John put his submarine dreams aside and he settled down and he started his own family. He took a job as a bucket designer, a humble existence for a man once destined for greatness. And it wouldn't be for another 15 years until John would finally catch a break. The US Navy started a competition for anyone who could build him a working submarine. Holland knew he had the skills. The chance was too good to pass up. Armed with new funders and his new company, the Holland Torpedo Boat Company, he set to work. But in exchange for the money up front, John had to sign over the rights to his plans for his submarine. He went on to create the Mark IV, the Zelensky, which failed, and the Mark V, which also failed, due to design conflicts with the US Navy. Holland returned to his funders and somehow convinced them to fund a ship that he had total control over. This would be John's last roll of the dice. He was all in. Over the years, JP redesigned and perfected the plans for the Holland 6, and finally on the 12th of April 1900, 27 years after moving to America to chase his dreams, John finally sold his plans for the Holland 6 to the US Navy. It was the turn of the century, and there was a Clare man standing on the edge of it. The USS Holland was commissioned on October 12, 1900, and it became the first submarine of the American US Navy. It sold for $150,000. John had a nice payday, but more impressively, he had cemented his name in the history books. Ironically, in 1901, the British Navy bought a small fleet of submarines from John. The very people he had started out to destroy now had become his customers. I'm sure he got a good laugh out of that, though. John Philip Holland died in New Jersey on August 12th in 1914, dedicating 56 of his 73 years to his craft. Dying at the start of World War I, John would never get to see the true impact that his creation would have on the world. And a part of me wonders how he would feel about it all. Regardless of the warfare that submarines have been used for, I think John was still right to stick to his vision and see his dreams through. I know he had his ups and his downs, but he never stopped believing in himself. And this one man's dream changed how we fight war. But not only that, it changed how we learn about our history and how we see our own world. And the work that JP Holland has done will be teaching us more about ourselves for centuries to come. And that is going to be it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. But before I go, I want to thank a couple of people. Gosia and her staff at the Frantic Chef, they let me in to film at the JP Holland Museum, so thank you very much. And also Daglan at Darken Media. He allowed me to use the clips from the JP Holland documentary that he made. This video wouldn't have been the same without it, so thank you very much. And that's it. Hope to see you again in the next video. Shalom.